Hello, everyone. I am Kristen Pol, and I am reporting from DrupalCon Chicago. Just a little bit about me. I am with Salsa Digital, and they have funded the AI initiative, and I'm working on the AI initiative on behalf of Salsa, and specifically working on something called Context Control Center, AI Context Module. So I wanted to give kind of a brief update from my hotel room. Can't see it because of the salsa branded background, but yeah, I'm in my hotel room taking a little break before the Dries note, and I wanted to give you an update. So exciting news on Context Control Center is last night I tagged a beta release and it's ready for people to dive in. So please check that out. And I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of what is behind Context Control Center. So I'm giving a couple talks today. This week. I've got one today with Aidan Foster, and we're going to go over Context Control Center and then also how it's working with like Canvas AI and behind the scenes with the Dries Note context and what's being demoed. So I have a couple slide decks here that I'm just going to touch upon. This is the longer slide deck that's going to happen today. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of Context Control Center. This is the overview page where you can go in and have quick links off to certain areas, and mainly you'll want to be adding context items. So that's a key feature, obviously. And here's some examples from the Dries note, including like being able to specify use cases of context, being able to specify structure of like having subcontexts and different types of contexts. And we'll go in and we'll edit one of these and see what it looks like. So this is a simple example, abbreviation, spelling, dates, and formatting. Has a bunch of rules that, make sense for this particular website, has always use, never use kind of information and examples of good and bad. So this is one example of type of context, and it's flexible, so you can do any kind of context. So I'm actually going to jump to I have another slide deck from that's going to be for Wednesday on it's going to be a fast-paced one, and I'm actually going to go to that slide deck real quick. So besides being in charge of the Context Control Center, the lead for that, I'm also program manager at for the Drupal AI Initiative. So the AI Initiative put out a one-year plan for this year, for 2026. And here's all the latest sponsors for the Drupal AI Initiative. Thank you to our sponsors. Part of the roadmap was defining like kind of these core capabilities that we're building out this year, and one of these is context management. So why does context matter? If you don't have context in your site or you have bad context, then you're going to get generic guessy garbage, which I love. I don't love that, but I love the phrase. If you have good context, your context, stuff coming from your human brains into the system, then you're going to get accurate, authentic, and aligned outputs from AI. So that's what you want. Lots of different types of context. You could have more outward facing, branding, products, services, that kind of thing. You could also have more internal facing context, your business rules, your processes, kind of how you run your business if you want to do AI that's more for, workflows or automation on that side. So basically, it's very flexible. And then very specific examples of context are things like glossaries, or like we saw earlier with the rules of do's and don'ts of like spellings, tone of voice, that kind of thing. So it's basically endless, but these are very concrete examples of what you might have with context. So Context Control Center is all about, you could have any amount of context organized in many ways. So this is trying to bring some order to that context and make it easy to manage. So the main features of Context Control Center are context management. So this is built on Drupal. Obviously, Drupal is content management system, and context is a type of content. There's a concept of scope, and we'll go into that a little more in more detail, but being able to provide criteria for the context that is for specific use cases and things like that. We could do the subcontext as we saw a little bit in that little video. And then there's this whole selection criteria and logic that happens in order to figure out, like, should this agent use this particular context or not? And right now, the system is mostly focused, has been tested and focused on agents, but it's abstracted out so that we're going to try to use it for other things such as automators and MCP as well. And then there's a lot of been care put into the admin experience for like site builders and also for developers. On the context management side, it's all the stuff that you would sort of expect. You got moderation, workflows, revisioning and comparing revisions. You could even schedule context to go in and out of being published if that makes sense for a specific use case. We have multilingual support and also a WYSIWYG markdown editor. Actually, I was going to move this slide, so let me just go do that here. Thought the flow was better. So that's context management, and then this idea of context scope. So you can scope your context to be global, meaning that it's relevant for any agent on the site or any AI. You can scope it based on use case. So the core ones that we have so far are like writing words or working in Canvas, but you could extend that and say you want it for reviewing content or maybe writing code or other things, right? So it's very flexible, it's extensible. And then free tagging. So we provide a vocabulary where you could basically just put whatever kind of tag you want in there and be able to categorize context that way and then map those to agents. Target entities, it's a very scary sounding, but a Drupal thing, which is just if you wanted to target context specifically to a certain number of pages, certain media, it's very flexible. So basically certain Canvas pages or certain articles or whatever, you could do that. Site sections, you can define site sections within the system, which is path-based, and say, oh, this context is related to the marketing pages, and which are at, /blog and /product, or these are related to the HR part of the site, which are like at, /about, /careers, things like that. And then also we have that language support of defining context for specific languages. Scopes subscriptions, I might actually take this slide out, maybe a little bit too much information for this, for the high level overview. So I'll skip that one for now, but it just allows you to map agents with scope in a more fine-grained manner. And then we talked about subcontext a little bit. So there's actually two types of subcontext. One is required, which is really more of an organizational thing. So if you wanted to break out your context into a parent and children, just for like, making it easier for you to see what you have, kind of the different sections of a particular, like in this case, brand guidelines, you could have required subcontext, which just, it tags along with the parent. Conditional subcontext is a little more interesting. That is if you wanted to break things out. So in this example, there's general page building guidelines, and then we have specific guidelines for different types of content. And so we could have the parent have some general idea of what to do, and then it could say, oh, for articles and blogs, use this child, and for product pages, use this child, and so forth, right? So there's some magic behind the scenes to pull in the right context in that case. And then at a big picture, this agent context selection is that, a user types in a prompt, goes to an agent, the agent's like, hey, I need some context. And behind the scenes in the context control center, it's doing, all this logic to try to figure out what's the best context for this agent. And there's a number of things that factor into that. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but a laundry list here on the right side, in order to figure out like what is the right context for this particular task at hand, that will yield the best results. And more detail is about that conditional context, which we talked about. So you can extend Context Control Center right now. The things you can extend is you can add more use cases. These would all be extensions through either a custom module or a contrib module. You could add specific use cases, like we said, about like writing code or reviewing content or basically anything that makes sense. You could add scope plugins. So the scope were like, use case or language or site sections, but you could add your own scope plugins if you wanted. For example, if you wanted to scope context based on user role or device even, it's very flexible. And then, for the programmers, if you wanted to like process that context before it ends up going to the agent, you could do that as well. So as I mentioned, beta release happened last night from this same room. So that's exciting. And yeah, we would love beta testers. So please try it out and see what you think. And file bugs and feature requests and UX improvements and all that good stuff. So the vision for Context Control Center is basically being the source of truth for context and being able to connect Drupal and external systems with AI all in one place and have that central hub. So we're hoping to have a stable 1.0 release in early May. And it has all of the things that we talked about, but just, buttoning that all up and making sure that it's ready to go. People can use it in production. And then we have a release that we're hoping for in August, which is going to have a lot more cool stuff, including working with external sources. So maybe you want to start, pulling in Google Analytics data or some accessibility analysis data from the outside and make that as context, having sort of starter templates for some of these common types of contexts that you might use, like, brand guidelines or writing guidelines, things like that. So, and even, so it's already a lot of logic for selecting, but want to even probably make it easier. So you can even do less configuration and it'll just try to figure it out for you. And also, like I mentioned, being able to work with other things besides agents. I mean, the capability is there, but we haven't really tested that out. So working with automators and we played a little bit with MCP, but, working with that more and making sure that's all supported. So yeah, I want to shout out to the top contributors. And thanks to Salsa for contributing so much to this work. Definitely been a lot and a lot of fun, but also put a lot of effort into this. It's also Drupal's 25th anniversary this year, so that's pretty exciting. But also shout out to Foster Interactive, especially Aidan Foster, for a lot of UX and feature discussions, to Acquia, especially to Scott Falconer, who's been helping with some pretty thorny agent context selection things going on. So that was super helpful. Also Marcus at Freely Give, as well as Jamie and helping behind the scenes on architectural stuff. At 1X Internet, a big special shout out to Bruno, again on the UX side and kind of front end programming. So I appreciate that help. iTech for Web, especially to Dima, who's been helping out also with some very interesting development, kind of back-end development sort of work. And last but not least, Emma from the University of Edinburgh for helping with also with UX along with Aidan. This was all those people that and organizations that worked on at least 10 issues. Another couple shout outs to we have Rob Loach at Calamuna, who's been helping out with some document loader stuff, which is coming up. I think we might be able to squeeze that in to 1.0, which is very exciting. And then, yeah, we have David at Opticy that's also been helping out. So yeah, thank you all for your help. And with that, signing off from DrupalCon, Hilton hotel room. But I'm going to upload this after the Dries Note and after my session, and you'll get this behind the scenes session or little sneak peek of what's going on. And to just show you it's real, this is on my local and it's working. This was my testing of adding friendly tests, text to a system, and here's the different scope that you can add. Oop, that's my alarm telling me to go down the Dries note. Oh, hey, I just put my hand up. Didn't mean to do that. So yeah, this is editing context. It shows a list of context. You could add subcontext that we talked about. Got that required and conditional. Um, you get usage stats. I was testing it earlier, so we see that I did a taxonomy thing and give some information about what happened there. And then there's a lot of settings for those backend folks where you can pick your provider that you're using, set your kind of even debugging stuff when you want to enable that. You can do some tuning of the types of, options that show up in the editing experience. You could actually turn off, if you want, you could turn off some of these scope plugins if they're not relevant to your site, which is also nice. This is the agents I have running. This is on Drupal CMS. So a bunch of different agents. And then if you want, you can go and test things on a particular agent, which is cool. This is a really cool debugger for the devs. And yeah, you can tune, your usage tracking and stuff. So yeah, this is it in action behind the scenes on my local. So it works. It's not vaporware, and I'd like you to try it out. I don't know why my hand's still up, but whatever. It's DrupalCon. So thank you, and hope to see you in the issue queue and also in the Drupal Slack channels. Feel free to reach out to me at any of these and also in Drupal Slack. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.